Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here on that stage and representing the panda, so thank you. So why should we preserve nature? Usually when I talk about business and biodiversity, I start by reminding people why preserving biodiversity is so vital for business. Because I've noticed that while everyone is much aware about how urgent it is to preserve the climate, it's less clear when it comes to nature and biodiversity, and you've noticed that as well. I think everyone is aware of the dependence on human societies and the economy on biodiversity. The fact that all the components of human well-being are in one way or another dependent on ecosystem services. Less biodiversity, less ecosystems means major economic problems in the short to medium term. In the production of raw materials, problem with site safety and problems in supply chain and so on. So these reasons to preserve biodiversity linked to business dependence and risks are certainly the most talked about in the CSR circles today, because they're highly rational and utilitarian dimension is the one that is the most appeals to the decision makers today. So it's on the top of the economic agenda, but I noticed that we rarely see the other value of nature, its intrinsic value, the value that individuals can attach simply to the existence of an ecosystem, of a life of a species, a population, values that may be linked, for example, to emotions, to wonder, empathy, to the beliefs and the sacredness of nature in itself. So now the question is, what exactly do we need to preserve? Because you soon realize that preserving nature is a pretty vague concept. Should we preserve a particular species? Should we put a particular ecosystem under glass? And if I reduce my pressure by X%, is that enough? To answer this correctly, it's really important to define what we want to achieve. Are we trying to preserve functions and services, or are we trying to preserve nature for its existence value? What could be the minimum desirable for humanity that allows us to live decently with an acceptable level of well-being? So to achieve this, we need to look for functional ecosystems, because only functional ecosystems are capable of providing a wide range of services, and that's very important. Functional ecosystems, but also resilient ecosystems capable of maintaining their functionality despite the occurrence of shocks and disturbances, and there will be a lot. So the terms that is well defined and is well accepted scientifically and institutionally, and that capture this consideration of functionality and resilience is the good ecological status. This remains relatively conceptual still. So in practical terms, what can we do to ensure that our ecosystems are resilient to guarantee good ecological status? These are two inseparable aspects to the ecological resilience of an ecosystem. First, the base, the biological diversity. So the more diverse it is, the more resilient it is. And then how to respect ecological thresholds, ensuring that disturbances, particularly our disturbances, do not exceed the limits of what ecosystems are capable of withstanding. So, for example, this means respecting resource extraction threshold, which must not exceed regeneration threshold, capacity, with water, fish, and timber, or also assimilation thresholds, not exceeding what ecosystems are capable of degrading or absorbing. So, for these points, companies should aim to achieve a good ecological status for the ecosystems with which they interact with. And to do so, it should base its action on the best scientific knowledge in particular the respect of these ecological thresholds. It's an approach that may seem ambitious, but once again, it's the bare minimum for our societies now. And this is obviously not just the opinion of WWF, but the opinion shared by the vast majority of all experts and research on the topic. Many companies have already committed to biodiversity, but for a long time, the watchword has been continuous improvement, slow, in line with environment management, PDCA, etc. Very imprecise approaches in terms of their ecological effectiveness. It has enabled companies to take ownership of the issue, sometimes to take interesting action for biodiversity. But today, given the catastrophic situation facing ecosystems, we expect companies to take significant action that is equal to the challenge. We're far away from that. It can be some in the formula from doing better to doing enough. That was published by the WRI in like almost 10 years ago. And at WWF, we say now from doing better to doing what nature needs. So the third question for me today is that how do we go about it? And there's some good news. The efforts made in the recent years by many actors have paid off. We're fortunate to have the right framework to ensure the viability of the biosphere. We're not naive, and we didn't say that the game was won. There's still a lot to be done. Almost everything remains to be done. But at least we are collectively aware of what is at stake. We collectively know what needs to be done, and above all, we have the right instruments and the right tools. So in short, we have a global framework to set the ambition, institutional reporting framework to structure communication on the main components of corporate responsibility, methodological framework using the most advanced tools and science, and advanced companies that could show the way. So for the first one, the global biodiversity framework defined at COP15, I won't stay long on that, I won't go back over it. It set the objective of halt and reverse nature loss by 2050. So it also asked governments to define robust reporting frameworks for the private sector. So that's at the global level. Then the new European framework reporting, this is what we just did, with CSRD to come in 2025. So this is not perfect, but at least that's the best framework that we have globally, collectively, at the planet level. So this one is interesting. These are three components, really element for WWF. The quantitative measurements of impact of nature, on nature, the setting of targets for nature, and the alignment of these objectives with science and ecological thresholds, and the construction of transition plan. So there are many other things inside of that, but these three, global quantitative measurements, setting of targets, and construction of transition plan are the most effective and important to be able to act in favor of biodiversity. So that's a good point. And this will be particularly scrutinized by stakeholders in disclosure, so I hope this will work. And then today, companies no longer have any excuses for not responding appropriately. Oh, sorry, I'm still a bit rehearsing that. So today, companies no longer have any excuses for not responding appropriately to these elements. If for a long time there was a wait-and-see attitude to approaches, doubt about the tools, hesitation about the level of ambition, today private sector has a favorable context in which to meet all these expectations, the framework, the tools, and scientific knowledge. So I'm thinking about the science-based target network framework developed since 2018 by more than 30 experts, organizations in conjunction with companies, and which provide extremely solid answers to the question of measuring impact on nature, the question of target, and the question of action plan. Some of the trends are that it draws on the best existing tools, specializing in certain ecosystem components to assess the impact and the state of nature, So some of you might know the Water Risk Filter, the Global Forest Watch, or also Globio, used by the CDC Biodiversity, which will be in the panel. It's also based on the best scientific knowledge, the planet boundaries that you've heard about, also the work of the IPCC, the GBF, and the wealth of information on the good ecological status of ecosystem that exists at local level. Thirdly, it's compatible with, complementary with other references, such as the TNFD, and everything now is almost available. So companies could take action clearly now, thanks to all this. And I like to finish with the pioneers, because this is not just a pitch and a speech. There's also lots of evidence. We work with companies because they are very important in our theory of change. The whole vision that we've just developed, with its conceptual, methodological, and institutional dimension, would be totally incomplete without the practical work that we've been carrying out with our partner this year. So Carrefour, Bell, Hermès, Alpro, Sodexo, and Michelin have all agreed to put their trust in us, sometimes since 2020, to test SBTN, sometimes on prototype version, taking risk to ensure that SBTN is as operational as possible. These efforts have paid off with publication in 23 of the first version of the guidance for water and terrestrial ecosystem. SBTN has also selected in 2023 a group of 17 companies that were sufficiently advanced in the method to test the first target setting mechanism. Among them, we are proud to have 3 partners who have been involved for a long time: Carrefour, Bell, and Alpro. And then there is Kering, which will be in the panel just afterwards. This is the vision that we actively promote for 6 years in WWF. And to be precise, that the Capital Natural team, which I represent today, is developing. I know that there is 3 reports that are going to be launched in 24 on the setting of the target with CSRD, on the construction of the nature transition plans also, and publishing also a report with feedbacks from several companies on the tool. We'll organize a meeting in autumn, and we hope that most of you will be part of this with the partners. So thank you very much for this moment. I just want to say a word in French. Nous sommes une ONG globale, nous agissons mondialement, localement. Nous avons besoin des efforts de tous pour construire le monde de demain. Je travaille à la philanthropie. Vos dons vont à des projets concrets. Nous développons énormément de projets sur le terrain. Je pense aussi à la sensibilisation que nous faisons notamment en ce moment sur la sauvegarde du plan national sur le loup et sur la dégradation des espèces comme le loup en termes de conservation. Je vous invite à signer ces pétitions et à soutenir le WWF et toutes les ONG et les associations présentes à ChangeNOW. Je vous remercie. Bonne journée.